tonight's stream is basically a discussion about comedy and cancel culture. We're going to be discussing, is offensive comedy always wrong? Should it always be cancelled? Can comedy do any genuine harms? I think there's a few things that we actually should consider. Andy, apparently you're a little bit loud now. Sorry, I'll turn you down a little bit.
Is that volume or personality?
Can't be personality. Although, speaking of which, I've got to send you a picture Luke sent me because I could have sworn it was you, like at a first glance. I don't know. I think maybe Luke, as he's getting older, is turning into you.
Definitely is, isn't he?
But yeah. So, what we need to consider about comedy is obviously the general intent of comedy is to make people laugh. So, on its surface, if it's making people laugh, it seems to be doing what it ought to. But that's not the only reason people laugh or find things funny. If you consider about perhaps the playground where people are teasing someone is getting bullied, and there are people laughing at such things. And we wouldn't necessarily say that this was right. We'd stop the kids from bullying the other one if we could. We'd hope that the teachers would actually do something instead of sweeping it under the carpet like they tend to, and so on and so forth. So, can comedy have the same sort of effect? Can comedy be a form of bullying rather than actually being comedy? What's your take on this, Kristen?
I go very much by the Terry Pratchett quote. I'm going to butcher it slightly, but it's something along the lines of parodying is supposed to mock those in power. If you're making fun of people who are already hurting, you're bullying, not parodying.
Yes, satire is what he was saying.
Satire, that was it. Yes.
But that quote was pretty much word for word, apart from saying parodying instead of satire.
And I genuinely don't know if I know the difference between parody and satire, in all honesty. But yeah, I think that quote largely is my thoughts on it. The whole punch up, don't punch down theory behind it.
What about comedy within a group, though? What if someone decides to punch down at their own group? Does that still cause harms?
Not sure.
How
Sorry,
do you
carry on,
mean?
Andy.
I was going to say, how do you mean punching down in your own group? So if there's like a group of mates, so us, how would I punch down if I'm going to joke? Because I'd say we were equal.
Well, we're having a bit of banter. That's a bit of a social thing. But imagine if you're on the stage and you're using your own group, whether it's a case of you're queer or you're trans or you're female or you're black or you're Asian or whatever it is. Do the jokes at your own stereotypes still have the potential to harm?
They
Like-
can do, but that's not punching down. That's self-deprecating humor.
It is, yeah.
This is something I've actually come across fairly recently because I've started trying to. I have a Patreon for custom D&D stuff that I make, and the couple of things which have got quite a lot of traction and gone quite viral have been some queer subclasses. All because I made a queer D&D item and somebody put up a comment in a Facebook group saying all this gay shit and new genders is ruining D&D. So of course, through nothing but spite, this has encouraged me to make lots and lots more queer content for D&D.
Brilliant.
The subclasses that I'm building, one of them was a rogue subclass of bisexuality, which included bi-erasure, which gave them benefits for stealth, and like can't sit straight, which is a common trope for queer people. And I actually had some people the first 100 people who complained were all straight people bitching about representation. But then I did actually have a couple of queer people come through saying that even self-deprecating humor from your own group does perpetuate certain stereotypes which are then used by the out-group against us. Which I understand, but I disagree that should then be silenced, because there is some power in reclaiming those negative stereotypes and using them as a point of celebration within your own group.
Yeah, it seems kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. There has to be perhaps a line. I tell a lot of self-deprecating humor about myself as well. I find it quite entertaining. It's a way to deal with your own shit and acknowledge perhaps your own flaws and habits and things like that. And within a particular group, I can see that it can be funny, but I can also see that there are certain things that perhaps can be used against you as well. And there perhaps is a line where that can go too far. And that's why I think that almost self-deprecation and self-deprecation of the group, self-deprecation of the group can almost be a form of punching down depending on what is said, especially if you're adhering to perhaps some typical sayings that someone from the outgroup might say. You're repeating something for the laugh that someone from the outgroup said, but it's okay if I say it because I'm in the in-group.
Yeah.
Well, what's your take on this, though, Andy?
I think with the self-deprecating stuff, it's kind of like within your own group, you're just trying to find a common ground with people and find things that it's just observation, almost like observation comedy. Like, oh, I'm this, and I've done this, and I'm such an idiot for thinking this, and it's just a way of connecting with other people that are on the same sort of wavelength, I suppose.
Community through shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what observational comedy is all about, really.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's not my most favourite, but I do like self-deprecating humour, which is that can be quite funny. But yeah, that's yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think with something like that, you've got to be careful of where you are in a particular group's path. Perhaps there are some things that you could say about your group once if you're in a group that's very marginalized, very unaccepted, then perhaps you almost have to be a little bit more careful with what you're saying and how you're saying it, at least until you're less marginalized. But that is
What in the way that people can use it against you.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But then I think that's again the important part of taking that power back and taking ownership of that shit. Like being a trans person, this is a rather pertinent example at the moment of how it's used in comedy, and I don't think that I should tread more carefully making jokes about my experience just because pricks like Ricky Gervais and Dave Chappelle make money and get even more famous off of punching down at us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more gender non-conforming and trans people who make a point of owning that shit and taking that back from those people is the positive.
More than fair. I think it's just a tough one, isn't it? Tough one to know when you could potentially causing a harm that you don't want.
Sure. And if I was conversing with a trans friend and they said they weren't comfortable making jokes because of that effect, I'm not going to have a go at them for it. I understand why they could feel like that.
And I'm sure in that situation you might perhaps refrain from maybe that sort of joke around them, because At the very least, they're a friend, and you don't want to damage that relationship.
Definitely. I think this is something that we need to touch on to
Know
a
your audience.
bigger degree. Maybe it deserves its own particular segment of, know your audience. And if somebody is offended or affected by something, just don't make those jokes around them, because you don't need to be a dick.
Well, this is. I mean, you need to know as well as that is you need to know intent is a massive thing within the comedy, making a joke. If your intent is to belittle someone just to get some cheap laughs, then it's you can get a laugh, but it's just not. It just doesn't seem right, really.
Bit of a shit
Whereas
laugh.
whereas if the intent is to either within satire, you're kind of becoming that sort of version, of sort of a parallel universe version of that thing, but you're kind of making fun of that yourself, so to speak.
I do think we do have to recognise as well that there are times when impact trumps intent. And I think that is why we do say that we're going to be careful about making those jokes around people who are genuinely affected like that.
Yes, yes.
For example, like a rape joke. There are people who will say rape jokes shouldn't ever be made. I disagree, but I know people who have been through that, who use humour about it to deal with it. I know people who have been through that, who, if that kind of joke was made around them, they would be, and genuinely, as the word is intended, triggered. They would have flashbacks, they would be emotionally taken back to that time. And if my intent was to make them laugh, the impact is what fucking mattered then, not the intent. So I'll stop.
But if you were a comedian telling jokes to an audience, you couldn't possibly know the history of every single person in that room.
That is fair, yeah.
That's true. Although, as a comedian, if you actually have a room full of people, you've got to the point where you're that big, people would probably expect that kind of comedy from you if they were the sort of jokes you told.
Yeah, you don't go to Jimmy Carr expecting easy jokes, nice jokes, you know.
You expect anti-jokes and shock humor.
You know? Well, yeah.
And if you went to it and then complained about it, bit of an idiot for going to that thing, really. I don't like the idea of victim blaming. At the end of the day, you should, if you're going to go see a comedian, have at least some understanding of what their material's going to be like. And
sometimes you don't even need to go. Sometimes you don't even need to go to complain about it. I've seen before. You need to at least view it to make a judgment, I'd say.
Yeah.
Rather than hearsay on other people. Yeah. I know you're kind of shaking your head, Chris.
Not in complete disagreement. I think it is possible to get reports back in trustworthy ways and be able to know what was said without having, like, I watched the Dave Chappelle stand-up thing.
Was this the story?
And beforehand, and I went in because I took that approach of, well, I should go and watch it because otherwise I don't really have the justification to bitch about it. But it was as had been explained, and the people who had reported it back to me, I could have trusted their report of that, and I would have still been justified in bitching about him being a transphobic fuckwit.
It's a story about his trans friend.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, who he decided to continually make jokes about and misgender, and make jokes about misgendering them to their kids with now dead parent. And yeah, it's the whole, oh, I can't be racist, I have a black friend kind of fucking approach. Like, I'm not transphobic, I had a trans friend. It's like, yes, but you're also misgendering them and fucking dead naming them and taking the piss out of who and what they were to get a laugh. That doesn't stop you being transphobic just because they were your friend. Because it doesn't sound like you were much of a fucking good one.
No, it doesn't. And I suppose I mean, that maybe that friend was genuinely okay with that. You know, maybe they were. Maybe they actually found it funny. Never know. Maybe the friend didn't even really exist.
But no, like I was saying, I wasn't shaking my head at you in complete disagreement. I do think you've got to have some level of understanding of what happened to be able to form an opinion and to complain. But you don't necessarily have to have watched the thing.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were on
Kind of,
the
that would have been more my take on it. I think I wouldn't believe someone if they told me. I'd have to go and watch it. And I did watch the story that you've mentioned, or that we've spoken about, and because I can't empathize with being trans, I didn't find it as bad as you would.
Which is understandable.
I actually thought in places it was a quite touching story, but I guess that's just from my.
Okay, to be honest, so did I. But
It felt like he was talking from the heart, but I understand where misgendering them and dead naming them would be an issue.
and making jokes about misgendering and two
Yes, yeah,
surviving kids is just fucking awful.
yeah.
But yeah, I agree. At points, that story, from what I remember, it's quite a long time since I watched it, did seem to be from the heart, quite touching, but then got ruined.
Yes.
But like I said, when we were first discussing about doing this stream, I mentioned Jim Jeffries. And
The Australian guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So his newest stand-up, he does a whole bit about trans people. And yeah, I don't know if the watchers or yourselves are very familiar with Jim Jeffries, but he's another shock comedian.
Yeah.
The biggest joke I remember of the first stand-up of his that I saw was how he spent days trying to get a fucking butt plug out of himself in a hotel in Amsterdam. And yeah, the guy is a shock comedian, but the way he handled telling jokes about the trans stuff was, I mean, he referred to trans women as men once, but it was, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of he can't imagine being a man wanting to cut their dick off. But that was the extent of the misgendering. That was the extent of anything that was like overtly negative at all. But he was still being the shock comedian.
And
he
you
did
could
it
say that's
and
just an
handled it really well.
acknowledgement of one's own ignorance and ability to put yourself in that situation more than any bad intent from it. It sounds like it's just like, I don't get it, but you know, there are other people who do get it. So like,
because I don't think that it's impossible for humour to be made about these subjects from people outside of the group either. Because there is funny shit about being trans. You don't have to be trans to be able to observe that. It's like, imagine somebody, this is my example that I always bring up of a joke I came up with fucking years ago, before I realised I was a trans woman, but I had realised that I was not cis. It's like, imagine somebody who can do a really good Arnie impression, just doing, I want your clothes, your boobs, and your menstrual cycle.
I remember you saying that. Actually.
It's a good fucking joke.
Yeah.
And if Arnie stood on fucking stage and did that, I would be in fucking stitches.
Yeah, so
but it's easier for me to make it because I am trans. So fuck you all.
I think this is something actually that I did want to cover, because I'm quite immune to being offended, especially when it's comedy. And I think there was a long time with a lot of subjects that perhaps I laughed at that I was like, oh, it's just a joke. Oh, it's just a joke. Shut up. Because I didn't at the time have the understanding of some of the impact these jokes have on other people. And it's like, if I go back and watch some comedies that I used to find funny, I cringe at them, feel like I'm dying inside. Like, I can't remember whether it was Eddie Murphy Raw or Delirious or maybe even, but even though there are still funny bits in there is a lot in there that I can't watch without going, oh, because I now have far more empathy and understanding. Well, empathy which has come from understanding the topic from other people's perspectives a lot more. And I mean, a lot of his jokes were obviously gay jokes, and we're in a different dimension now. I know that there's still a lot of bias against homosexuals, especially in certain places around the world, but at least from our society, I think it's generally well accepted. You know, it's not as new and on the line as the trans thing. And I think because of past experiences, I'm already on the point where I'm more understanding of the situation, and I do try and weigh up the harms in the jokes myself. But ultimately, I know that I have no real finger on the pulse, if you will, because again, it's not me that the jokes are being made about. And something that might seem completely innocent to me at first could actually have a darker undertone. And I actually like dark comedy as well. You know, I like the dark humor because I can separate humor from the actual dark situation. Like you guys mentioned earlier, the whole rape joke. The actual situation, the content of rape, absolutely awful, absolutely horrible. Wouldn't want anyone I know to go through anything like that.
Everyone you don't know, but nobody you know.
Well, anyone in general, but you know what I mean. But I can sort of separate that sort of joke. And I sometimes feel like I can do that with certain situations, but when it's something like dehumanizing an entire group of people, there is a lot more harm being done in general.
I think we also need to be aware of, in a joke, whether the thing is what is being joked about or whether the thing is a framing device. So, like with the rape jokes, if you make a joke which is about somebody being raped and that action and experience, that is a shitty joke. You should not do that. But if your joke is like the one, a woman walks into a police station and says, "Help, I've been raped." It's like, don't you mean rape? Goes, no, there was a bunch of them. That's a fucking good joke. And
I haven't heard that one before.
it's not about rape. It's not about somebody being raped. It's not about the action. It's a fucking language joke, which
Yes.
uses a really fucking horrible thing as a framing device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
that's fair.
similar one to that goes, statistically, 9 out of 10 people enjoy gang rape.
Yeah, which
Which
is a math joke.
is, yeah,
That one
I haven't
is,
heard
I
that
will
one.
say, on the fucking line.
that's
But
It
that's
is very
yeah, that
blind,
one's yeah.
But
but
again,
again,
like you
I
wouldn't want
think,
it's back to the audience, right? If you
yeah,
were around someone who you know who had those experiences, even though they are language jokes, because of the content that is there with that audience, you wouldn't say those jokes all.
100%.
You know, I think there's a lot of language as well that we actually grow up saying and not necessarily realizing the impact. I mean, the big one for me growing up was, "Oh, that's so gay," and it was something that was said. I didn't even have any concept of what being gay was at the time. really. It was just a word that was used for, oh, that's bad. It's so
Lame.
gay. Because
Like
the word
when,
bad at that
yeah,
time meant
it meant
that's
lame. Yeah,
wicked. Like, that's bad, man.
that's bad, man. No, but gay. When I was at school, gay was kind of lame. That's lame. Oh, that's
Yeah.
gay.
And that's all
That's
it
what.
meant to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that actually there were people who were upset by this. And I could understand why, because they were marginalized. It was using their group as in a derogatory way. And it was like, it's sort of that was like the first thing that clicked. It was like, oh, actually, yeah, this is actually drawing a line between someone who's homosexual and actually just saying it's bad, even though that isn't the intent at all. And it took a long time for me to even stop going, oh, they're gay. I've done it a fair few times around friends and gone, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it that way. It's a habit I'm trying to stop myself from doing. Like, please. I understand. I'm a dick.
But to be fair, I think that you just said there is the intent that actually matters. Whether the intent of a joke is good or bad, the intent to improve and stop doing it if you've noticed and learned that it harms people is what matters. It's like outside of comedy again, but people misgendering me who I've been friends with for years. And they're like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. It's like, thank you. Let's move on.
Yeah. The thing is, I think most. This is obviously coming from it's male. I think generally trans people, if you misgender them and you apologise, they'd be fine about it.
Yeah.
You
It's
know
just,
what I mean?
if you do so,
It's
make sure that the apology stays around them and not yourself. Because that is one thing I have noticed, and with myself and watching it happen around other people, not just trans people, but people start to reframe an apology to how much they're trying and how much they're trying to be better. And the apology for how much you've upset somebody starts being a story about how good you actually really are. It's like, yeah, don't do that. Sorry, let's move on. Done. Don't make a big deal.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. And do you know what? In some of those situations, I'm sure you will find someone who doesn't accept the apology, that is really annoyed by it, is really hurt by it. And that is probably because they've got a lot of shit going on. And not everyone is going to be as understanding, even if it's someone that you've been friends with for years, right? You might have caught them on a bad day and they're like, oh, fuck you, and storm off or whatever, or hit you or whatever happens. So you can't always expect, just because you've said you're sorry, just because you've realized you've done a wrong, for that to be okay. You hope that the intent is going to be taken into it, but you can't guarantee that.
Just because you're ready to apologize doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to forgive.
Exactly.
And hopefully they will be. Hopefully it's just they've had a shitty day. But like with this stuff especially, it does fucking pile up after a while, and it is easy to fucking snap. So yeah.
Yeah, and it could be the first and only time you've done it, but that could just be the straw that broke the camel's hump as well.
You've done it, but the 18th time they've heard it in the last hour.
Yeah. So, with some of the comedy that we look back on, though, stuff that you now go, oh no, I can't believe that this was actually okay for someone to say. This is proper punching down. This is going to be something that is going to inspired bias against a group. This is stuff that is going to be used to tease people in schools, office environments. It's stuff that's going to cause this group to be dehumanized and find it harder to fight for their equal rights. Were we actually wrong to find it funny at the time if we did?
Question.
Yeah, I don't think
Tough
there
one.
is a yes or no, like, complete black or white answer to that, because we develop, we learn, we grow. it was a bad thing to have found funny, but who we were then, I mean, we were incorrect, but were we wrong? I think is. Do you know what I mean with the kind of difference of the weight
Yeah,
of
culture on the whole just evolves, and obviously with comedy evolving with it, we do change our minds on certain things, and as we learn more, I don't think necessarily we were wrong at the time to find it funny, um, purely because we were ignorant to certain facts. It's like if you think of uh, science, you base decisions on facts that you've got at the time, or observations that you've got at the time. And as you evolve and grow and you get more information surrounding this certain thing, your views and that kind of changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think science is a really good analogy there, actually, because like
Thank you.
we were wrong to think that migraines were caused by demons living in your head, and you should go and be trepanned to get rid of it. But was a peasant in the medieval times wrong to seek a physician
A
to
barber.
get trepanning to get rid of the demons because they were getting migraines? It's like, I mean, technically, yes, but that was what they had. That was what they knew.
That was the
The
information they went off. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, if we were to just make this about something that I think three of us will agree is wrong, but if you think about slavery, a lot of people back then were working off the assumption that the people who were enslaved were a lesser race. Now, we will say that they were wrong for doing that and they should have known better. So, could that not be applied to the comedy? We didn't know better. So, yes, it was wrong for us to laugh at that, but we didn't know better. So, our intent wasn't a malicious intent. We laughed because we didn't know better. So, and we have learned, and so we've been on the right path. So we can perhaps forgive ourselves finding things funny in the past. But could we not say the same sort of thing about other things that were thought to be perhaps a moral thing but we now go, actually, no, that was never. I mean, unless you're a relativist, at which point, you're going to say, well, no, it used to be. It's not now. But that's not where I'm going with this.
I think there is also a difference between us being wrong to laugh at a joke that we were ignorant of the implications of then, and the people who made the jokes.
Yes. So the people who were perhaps keeping the slaves were the ones who were making the jokes.
Yeah,
And the audience were laughing, and they're the people who perhaps teased the slave, allowed the slaves to be enslaved.
they weren't the slave owners, but they weren't rioting in the streets to get people released.
Yeah. Because it
They
was
didn't
just
know.
the society, it was the
Well, yeah,
just
that's what it
accepted
always
it.
was. Yeah.
It's all they had to go off. But
There should be a larger degree of responsibility to the people who are actively making X than the people who are experiencing X, whether that's gay jokes or whatever, slavery or any of these things that we now know are wrong. We didn't then, but there's a higher degree of responsibility for the people causing than the people experiencing.
so, I mean, we could also take this away from comedy a little bit, and when we talk about like free speech, and there is speech that can incite riots, and we would say that perhaps that this shouldn't be protected speech, because they are going to be causing a lot of violence. And that's in the same sort of way that, comedy cause these harms to certain people. It's not saying you can't make a gay joke, you can't make a trans joke, you can't laugh about these things. I mean, I think you can and should laugh about these things. Just don't do it in a way that's gonna cause someone else any harm. On a relativistic scale as well, there though, because there's always going to be some Karen that finds something offensive and causes a problem. And even outside of the whole Karen joke, like there is always going to be someone who had an experience, and that joke would potentially upset, even if the intentions were good, even if it was worded perfectly placidly, and it wasn't even. No, it was a genuine joke. There could still be someone that feels a harm.
Yeah, and then your reaction to that dictates what kind of a fucking person you are, though. If your reaction to that is, oh shit, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to do that to you, that's my kind of comedy, though, so maybe don't come to my shows in the future because I'm gonna fuck up again. Okay, cool. If your reaction to that is, oh, look at the fucking triggered snowflake, fuck you, then you're a dick.
I'd agree with that.
It's like I raised again in the chat before, Bo Burnham.
Yeah.
He's rather famous now, but I've been a fan of his for fucking years. I don't know if you remember the TV show Rude Tube, where at the end of the year, I think it was Channel 4, Channel 5, something, and it was a compilation of the 100 funniest YouTube short videos from the year. And I saw him years and years and years ago, when there were still TV programs which were compilations of fucking YouTube videos. But some of his shit was fucking offensive. He does a song called New Math, and most of it is really fucking clever and really fucking funny. And the last line of this song is, squaring numbers is just like women. If they're under 13, just do them in your head.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But on the show which he released on Netflix after the lockdown, Inside, he's got a song on there where he addresses this shit. He's got a song called Problematic, and he sings about how he remembers when he was a kid dressing up as Aladdin, and although he didn't darken his skin, it still feels fucking weird to look back at that kind of thing. And the whole song is about, look, hold me accountable. I've done shitty stuff, and I'm still going to do some shitty stuff, but I'm trying to learn and grow. And for a famous comedian to actually make a point of that, I think is, like I say, that's the intent that fucking matters, regardless of what the intent behind the joke was.
What about offense in general, though? Right? Because I mentioned that there are some people who just get offended by anything. They get offended on other people's halves. I mean, I've had it where I've seen people get offended on behalf of their gay friend. With their gay friends, they're all laughing and they're being offended about the gay, and it's like, where's this offense coming from? Like, this is sort of being an overprotective sort of mother hen type thing to people. But this joke wasn't pushing down. This was perfectly on the line. It was definitely on the line. But why are you offended by this when the people who are targeted by this joke are not even
White Knight syndrome?
Well, yeah, and then there are a lot of people who have that. But what about offense? Should we actually care about every person who feels offended?
No.
I think it depends, though, because there are also degrees of what you're saying, and people taking offense on behalf of others isn't necessarily a bad.
No, not always. No, especially if someone's punching down and they're taking offense on it and they're standing up for their friends. Perhaps their
That's not
friends
what you're
don't
talking
have the
about.
confidence
No,
to do
but
it.
I just wanted to make that separation as
Yeah.
because there are people who do that and
Stand,
are doing
standing
it
up.
with.
Yeah, standing up for that thing is a good thing,
Most
definitely.
definitely. But offense in
But
general.
the misplaced offence on behalf of something else, that's what you're asking, isn't it?
Not just the misplaced offense on someone else, even just people who are just overly offended by anything in comedy. Even when it's perhaps not something that is even targeting a group. So, but maybe there's a two-layer question there, you know? So, let's talk about one, comedy that does target a group but doesn't punch down, and two, no one in particular is targeted, but people are still offended. Perhaps it's the language that's used, or they don't like the idea of someone doing the action described. Whatever it is, they're getting offended by it. They're a get off my lawn type person.
So the latter, when you're saying the language being used, it would be people who are offended by swearing.
Yeah, it could be even like non-swearing. You know, some people get offended by the word hell, stuff like that. Like, we're talking about any sort of language trigger, anything that just for whatever reason they get riled up about. They're offended.
We have a weird pop-up on the screen on the YouTube video. That's gone.
Probably the one
Gone now.
saying
Are there hot
saying
milfs in your area?
No, it's basically
If not, I've checked.
I think I set an overlay for every 15 minutes. Comes up with make sure you subscribe, because I hate telling people to do that sort of thing.
Right.
But yeah, back to a thing that I rudely interrupted. Yeah, there are always going to be people who seek out offence and want to.
They want to be offended. It's like they want to have the drama, don't they?
Yeah, and there isn't ever going to be a way to appease those people. It's because that's what they're trying to achieve.
They're
And
effectively
I think
the real world trolls.
well, you can listen to them. I think that's the most you can do, and you can kind of take the next step there if you think it's warranted or if it's not.
yeah, see if they've got a genuine concern.
You can either have a serious discussion with them, say, look, this is that it's misplaced because of A, B, and C, and the intent was this, which I suppose you could really do if the offence is not if it's not misplaced. You could say, oh, this was my intent, but I kind of touches on what you said earlier about uh, trying
Impact.
to saying, oh, I didn't mean it like this. This was the intent, and I structured it this way because of this. um I tried my best, and obviously it hasn't worked, and that's not what I meant. So, but yeah, it's touching on what you kind of said earlier. But yeah, for people that are just offended at everything, it's fuck them, snowflakes.
so
But also, it does go back again to some degree of what you were saying earlier, Joe, of, well, maybe it's just the straw that broke the camel's back sometimes. And there are going to be people who seem like they're that, but it isn't. So,
Every straw breaks the camel's back.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
difficult to navigate. And like I say, it's never going to be possible to appease everyone who is offended by stuff. It's
and navigate the situation either. It's never going to be easy to actually navigate every situation perfectly, because I think to a degree what you were alluding to earlier, and I hopefully understood, is you should almost be as charitable as possible to every sort of offense and try and see if there is that sort of genuine harm being done. Learn to understand. Don't instantly go, oh, fuck off. You know, in the same way that when I was younger and I didn't understand the harms that jokes did, but oh, fuck off, it's just a joke. You know, maybe not be that way. Try and understand in the first. But if they are that sort of, does seem to be just offended. They're offended for offended's sake.
Oh yeah, if you make a point of trying to understand and having a bit of empathy and compassion, and their response is to be even more combative, then you've done what you can. You don't have to continue making space for people if they obviously just want to fight. But you do have a bit of a responsibility, I believe, as a decent person to try and understand a little bit first.
Yeah. So, with someone that is offended, try and understand their reasoning. But
Yeah.
there are going to be times where they are just someone who's offended for being offended's sake. So, simply someone being offended by something isn't necessarily enough to conclude that it's offensive. And even if it's offensive, if it's something that should perhaps be cancelled. Because something being offensive, we're going back to our intense power that this can have. Sometimes that offensive humor, that shock humor, is what can be used to make a very good point and get people to understand things that didn't understand. So something simply being offensive, it's not a reason for it to be. But we should try and listen to people who are offended, find out why they're offended.
Yeah, it comes back to the punching down thing again. If something's offensive and it's not punching down on anyone, then still try and understand and maybe adjust, but sometimes offensive stuff is the point. And if you're offending people while you're punching up, not punching down, that is kind of what satire's there for. You're supposed to be kind of offending the higher ups a bit.
And it's just, the people in power who have a problem with what you're saying. Well, they shouldn't be such dicks then in the first place.
Yeah.
So, whilst we've covered off like sort of offense, and we've sort of had a look back, and I will address looking back to the past again when we get closer to. But simply being offended isn't enough for us to conclude something. Right? In fact, sometimes something being offensive is right, very right, should be offensive, and should allow it. And I think that's a really nice way to put it, because so many people do have offended. I remember when I first saw Steve Hughes as offended, and that did make me laugh, because I think he had
Yeah.
a
He's
lot.
very funny.
Yeah, he had a lot of good points. Although I think sometimes there is a point there where the other side can go too far, because because you're offended. No, you lose the understanding. Obviously that wasn't the point of what he was making there. He was talking about people offended by everything, not people who generally. But you're offended, you weren't invited. I think you'll actually find that in the description, everyone was invited. So I'm offended you didn't join us. There you go.
But yeah, regarding Steve Hughes, I very highly recommend people look him up on YouTube and watch the Live at the Apollo or Comedy Roadshow clips, and then stop there. Because I've watched his stand-up shows, and the guy is a fucking conspiracy nut.
Yeah, he does go a bit off one, doesn't he? Leah's now offended at herself because she didn't know.
But yeah, he does a wonderful bit, doesn't he, about growing up in Australia where everybody's racist and into sports, and he was there and he didn't know what to kick.
Yeah. Someone else was telling me the other day that apparently, like, there's still some very backwards things in Australia where there is still a lot more racism in places around. I found surprising. Sorry, that's going very off piece. Are there any particular jokes that either of you can remember that
No.
you
I already told it. Shut up.
that you once found absolutely hilarious, but now you can't even bring yourself to repeat, or you don't even want to acknowledge?
I'm gonna say that's a really bad question for a feed, isn't it? Are there any jokes you remember that you aren't willing to repeat? Yes.
Any yeah.
I was just going to see if I could try and lure them out of you, because
You're trying to get us cancelled. You're gonna dox us. Gonna get me fired.
First stream this year, and we're going to get us cancelled. Let's do it.
Look at this knobhead.
Which brings us
I
on.
honestly can't think of any, but you brought up Eddie Murphy's live. I did watch it back maybe about a year ago, and I thought, oh, some of it still fucking hilarious, and it holds up really well. But some of it's just like, yeah,
I feel
doesn't really work now. Like, it kind of. So I mean, this is coming away from jokes and moving into films. One film that I did find fucking hilarious when I was a kid, when it first came out, was Ace Ventura.
Yeah.
Now,
I was going to bring this one up later.
Do you know, I never actually found his character funny. I've never found Jim Carrey that funny. I've liked his more serious movies, Eternal Sunshine and Number 23, but I've never found his funny stuff.
23, that was a bit dodgy. 23.
I liked
but
it. It was
weird.
Right. It was weird.
It was weird.
Yeah.
No, I was 10 when it came out. You know, Dumb and Dumber, Mask, and Ace Ventura all come out round about the same time, and I find all of them hilarious. But yeah, the main antagonist in the film was Ray Finkel, dressed up as I can't remember was it Einhorn or something like that. But anyway, it was a trans. Would you call it a trans woman? Would that be a trans woman?
I think the intent in the film is that they were, but it's been a while. That's one I'm very fucking.
Yeah, I can't remember if they're just dressing up to hide for some weird reason, or if they are trans.
Yeah, neither can I off the top of my head. But regardless, the joke around it are very.
It's obviously the very end bit that's where he's growing up and all that sort of stuff, and he finds out that it's actually the lieutenant, whatever her name is actually the football player, the American football player. And I'm unsure about this one because I still find it really funny. But that scene, I'm not. This is why I wanted to ask you, Kristen. Believe it or not, like how do you feel about that film? Does it trigger you in any way, or is it?
I have not rewatched that film in probably a decade, and in all honesty, I've got no fucking intention of doing so because I have good memories of it.
Yeah.
You don't want to spoil them.
I don't want to ruin that shit for myself. I want that to still have that bit of a fucking pedestal in my fucking early teen years.
It came out in 94. I was 10.
Was it 94? Was it?
I'm sure it was 94, something like that. Yeah.
Well, if you were 10, it was.
Pre-teen years. I'd have been 9, 10-ish when I first saw it, and it's. There are films which do the same kind of joke, where the comedy is about a man dressing up as a woman. Look at fucking Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes, that's very different, isn't it? And actually, another one that I want to bring up in a minute is Tu Wong Fu. But Leah's just said another comedy film on the same thread that no longer works, Joanna Man. And I have never heard of this film.
Joanna Man.
No. So, Leah, none of us have actually heard it, but it sounds like one that we should avoid. But now that I've
Rat
heard of
Race
it,
does it as well.
what was that? Sorry.
Rat Race. Do you remember that one?
One with John Cleese and
Yeah.
Rowan Atkinson. I'm in
Yes.
a race. I'm in a race. That one, isn't it?
And
that was
Cuba
years
Gooding
ago.
Jr., who
Yeah.
half of the jokes of his in the film are about men dressed as women and crashing a fucking bus because he's so shocked of a woman having a deep voice that he drives it off a fucking cliff. It's like they're like I say, Mrs. Doubtfire, the entire fucking basis of that film is look at how funny it is for a man to be dressed as a woman, and at no point would I find that film offensive or triggering.
Do you know what?
And
The
then
one
there are
thing
other
that
films that do it as a throwaway joke, and it is shitty.
That's the difference, isn't it? It's a man dressing as a woman as opposed to someone being
A trans woman.
transgender. Yeah, a trans woman.
Yeah, he's also not trying to be a drag queen or fill
No.
any group. He just wants to be close to his kids, and
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
bit. It's the intent behind it. But there is something about this film that I don't think anyone realizes when they're younger. And as much as I don't like Pierce Brosnan in general, he gets labeled as a bad guy in the film, but he's not. He's actually a really good guy. He's just the other guy. And like he hasn't done anything wrong, but you hate him when you watch that as a kid. Like, oh yeah,
You're stealing their kids.
Yeah.
Like, no, he's got a girlfriend.
Yeah.
When he threw that fruit at his head, I thought it was hilarious. It was a drive-by fruiting. Yeah,
Have
that
you
film's great. I love
seen
it.
To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Judy Newmar?
Don't think so.
All right,
No.
I would
Certainly
say
not for a long time.
you have to watch it because it's Patrick Swayze and Wesley Snipes as drag queen. But it's actually
Oh, I've heard of that one. I've not
it's a
seen it.
really
It's
heartwarming
been
sort of
promoted
story.
quite a lot recently.
Sorry, it's
been promoted quite a lot in queer spaces on Facebook recently.
oh
Of this
really?
whole, this film was made 20 years ago. Imagine them trying to get away with that in America today. It's like, which is being shown as a kind of we've moved backwards and look how progressive it was back then, which is a bit of a fucking.
I don't know. It might be right for
Like,
America.
fucking right.
America seems to be going backwards. A lot of people in America feel like it's going backwards because I've been having conversations with a lot of Americans. Obviously, you know that I used to live there, and I was talking about my experiences there, and people have often said, "No, it's so much worse than that." I thought it was pretty bad back then, but when it came to like Tu Wong Fu, I mean, obviously, again, as a straight man, maybe I don't understand quite as much as I hope I do, but I didn't see that as punching down in any way, shape, or form. I thought there was a good little story there, and it seemed to be well. Okay, part of the humor was obviously seeing Wesley Snipes in drag, like one of the hardest nuts in Hollywood, especially at the
Action film, yeah.
time. Like there was a bit of fucking hell.
Passenger 57, you know, for the Demolition Man.
But I think they all played the characters really well and like convincingly. Like, but that is coming from my perspective, and I really want to have a conversation with a group of gay people, especially if any of them are drag queens, that have seen this movie, because pretty much every gay person who I've ever asked, because I want to find out if I've missed anything with it. Never even heard of it. So yeah, but that is one that I do enjoy, and I suppose in some, I hope not to have the conversation that dispels my enjoyment of it in the same way that we can look back on stuff.
The thing is, if someone says, "Oh yeah, that's wrong because of A, B, and C," are you wrong to find it find it hilarious now?
Well, this is back to the original
Yeah,
question.
yeah. This is it. Yeah.
It depends on what A, B, and C are, I think.
It's almost like you're worried about, because I'm laughing at this and it's on this topic. Oh, should I be laughing at it? Is there something I'm missing? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's good to look for stuff that you're missing. You
Mm.
don't want to cause harms. Hey Claire, how you doing? You don't want to cause harm, and you want to be aware if you are doing harm to any other. And if actually by me promoting this movie, it gets people to watch it, and then somehow it causes a harm further down.
But I think this goes back as well to what I was saying earlier about the different degree of responsibility from a creator to somebody who's watching. I mean, yes, if you're promoting that everybody goes out and watches this film and it turns out to be a horribly homophobic piece of trash, then yeah, stop promoting that that's a good film to watch. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you should stop finding it funny. It means that Hollywood should take a good fucking look at themselves and stop putting out stuff that is horrible homophobic trash.
See,
And
they dealt with
perpetuating
homophobia within the movie as well. There were people in the movie that were homophobic and got their comeuppance.
good.
So,
But yeah, but if you were to go and learn from gay people and drag queens that, oh, actually, no, this is really problematic because of A, B, and C, but you still could watch it and get a laugh, I don't think that makes you a terrible person. It's just you don't have those lived experiences which stop that from landing with you.
but would
But
you
so
then
long
still
as
be
you then
wrong
don't
to say, everybody, look at this? This is the drag experience.
Yeah, probably don't
Do
go
that.
out and promote it to everyone because, like I think I was saying earlier, or I meant to, and I think I got distracted, is that a lot of the issues with these jokes isn't necessarily that a joke is like really actively fucking harmful in itself in a moment, but it perpetuates a normality of, well, these are people to be laughed at. These are people who should be othered. You shouldn't take these people seriously. They're not people whose feelings you should consider. Your laughter is more important.
Mm,
And it's the people who are responsible for spreading that shit that are in the wrong, not the person who finds the joke funny.
makes a lot of sense. Leah's got a good point about Pierce Brosnan from earlier, and it's the protection of how, I suppose that's projection of how most children feel when their parents split up and the new man or woman comes along, and that's definitely it. I mean, especially if you're someone who has had that happen, you've had the split up happen, and you had the stepdad, stepmom, or whatever. You, especially as a child, it's a lot harder to disassociate from those feelings, which is why watching it back as an adult, even if you have had the experience as a kid, you can look back and go, really a bad guy though. And this is again,
I've never experienced that because I've never had a stepmom or a stepdad. But looking at the videos that I've seen about stepmoms, it looks really fun.
yeah.
I've derailed you now. Continue.
Sorry,
I'm just
I
thinking
find
about
it
stepmoms.
offensive.
um. So yes, I'm definitely with you that the creators definitely have more responsibility, and I think in some respects, when like Netflix pulled things like Little Britain. Little Britain, that's what I wanted to talk about earlier. Obviously, they did their whole guy in a dress saying that they're a lady.
Yeah.
Really bad take on being trans. Because it wasn't really a take on being trans.
No, it wasn't.
It was a take on being a guy in a dress.
I think it was more just. It depends which sketch you're talking about, really. I mean, there are ones. Yeah, I don't think that. Do they have beards? I think one of them did, didn't they?
Yeah. I think that I think they could have done it better. I don't think that they had the intent of harming. I think it was a caricature. Everything they did in that was caricatures. It was, let's take this concept and turn it into an absurdism, basically. And from that perspective, you can understand actually there wasn't the intent to harm trans community as such, but it could be seen as harmful because a lot of people just see the trans community in that way. That is their image, that is their only understanding of what it is to be a trans person. So even though the caricature from a certain angle, yes, amusing, get it, it had that layer of harm to it that perhaps they didn't foresee. I mean, they've even said, looking back on it, they would undo a lot of it, and I think it was
I'm not entirely sure I believe them. Because coming from Matt Lucas, I would believe, but fuck me, David Williams is a piece of shit.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he is a terrible person. I mean, look at his books as well. He's may go on about like how looking back it was harmful and perpetuating bad things, and he wouldn't do it now. And then he releases books with like overtly racist Chinese names and fat shaming kids and poor shaming kids, and that's what his fucking children's novels are based on.
Excellent. So
Who
someone
can get
recommended them to me the other day, and I was like, really? I think I might stick with Roald Dahl.
Yeah. But
I didn't.
yeah, I think their show was largely playing with overt caricatures and
Which a lot of sketch shows were. I mean, look at League of Gentlemen. That was obviously a bit dark, but it's again men dressing up as women. I mean, you could go back to like Monty Python and stuff like that. It happens in so many sketch shows.
yeah, I think Python are a really good example of it being done well, largely at least. I know John Cleese has kind of doubled down in recent years of
He's swung all the way to the right, hasn't he?
yeah, and bemoaning the snowflake culture and all of that kind of shit. But back in their prime, they did handle stuff. It's like the birth scene. And it's like, is it a boy or a girl? Like, I think it's a little bit too early to be attributing labels like that, isn't it? It's like, and it's presented as an absurdist thing, but it's funny. And the fucking scene in Life of Brian, it's like, oh, where's the fetus going to gestate? In a box? And it's like, they're not punching down. They're highlighting absurdities. And this is like I was saying, like the fucking Arnie impression. You can make jokes about the trans experience. You can make jokes about what it's like to be gay. You can make jokes about fucking anything. But it's how you
I bet
frame
you
it,
do.
what you do with it. And I don't feel that Monty Python ever intentionally punched down, or certainly not that I remember. And I do rewatch quite a lot of their stuff fairly often. But
Yeah.
absurdist comedy has a lot more leeway to play with. You can be a lot more forgiving with absurdism than you can with observational comedy. Like, look at that trans person. Like, that's not a joke. What the fuck are you doing? Why are you on stage making millions?
Yeah. There is definitely a difference, but there is still the potential for harm caused. And I think that's probably why, Little Britain was pulled from Netflix. And it wasn't just the trans stuff. Yeah. I don't know.
I think it was more the blackface, wasn't it, that it got pulled from Netflix? Because one of them, when I think they were dressed up as big, large women, and one of them was black, and they
yes,
did
Matt Lucas did
blackface.
play. Yeah,
Yes.
that is an interesting one as well. I actually saw, literally last night, a little clip on Facebook, and I wish I'd saved it. And it was this very, very, very white comedian. And he was talking to all the the black members in the audience. And, I mean, blackface is wrong, right? Right? I shouldn't do blackface, right? I shouldn't do black. He was going around and did it. It's like, but you know what? 1 a.m. We're on an assassination mission. We're in the desert, right? I think at that point in time, blackface might be okay, because if not, we're just going to get killed. Because I'm like, look at my complexion. I'm like a light in the middle of the desert.
I think that has to.
The same for you. You're not allowed to smile. And it was just it context. He played to the audience. It was done. There wasn't any punching down done there. There was the acknowledgement that it's actually wrong, and obviously getting up in your Navy SEAL gear or your Marines or your whatever they were is a bit different to
you're conflating blackface with camouflage.
Yeah, this is it. Paint your face,
but that's what,
paint your face black to do that. Yeah. But yeah, that's the key thing. The joke is the switch of the exactly. You're taking yourself one way and
it's
going the other.
Switch.
The misdirection. Yeah.
And in arguments online, that's fucking annoying. But in comedy, it's a useful device. But I think there's a lot of things like that people don't necessarily realize in comedy. I mean, when that joke started, I felt awkward because of how
I was looking at. He was talking to every black person in the audience.
Yeah, and it was just
to say it's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah,
blackface is wrong, isn't it? Yeah.
Where is this going to go? This could go anywhere, and I'm glad that it went where it did. It was like, yes, right. And
the mark of a clever comedian, though, isn't it?
Yes, of course it is.
I think a big part of comedy is the same as with a good horror or a good thriller, is the build of tension and release.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's equally important in comedy.
Bit of edging as well.
Certain types of comedy.
I also watched. I can't remember his name actually. It was a comedian that was on. I think it was on Netflix, and one of his jokes were. I don't know how it started, but he said, "I don't want my son to be gay," and it was just like, "Ooh, where's he going with this?" He's like, I can't do it. But in the same light, I don't want my daughter to be straight. Basically, I don't want anyone to fuck my kids. That was basically the joke. But obviously, starting off with "I don't want my son to be gay," like, oh, can't say that.
That's just it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be on the line and can look like it's going to go too far and then doesn't. And that's a good way for things to go as well. And as we've said, there's shock comedy, other forms of offensive comedy that really make the point that is required. So it's not so much that offense is necessarily a bad thing, or there are things that shouldn't be said about a certain group, just because it's a certain group. There are obviously things that punching down is wrong. But there's this whole take that anyone who gets pulled up on, for example, the punching down side of is this whole cancel culture, and it's another way to dismiss things. I do think there are some people, like we were talking about earlier, who are too easily offended by everything, and they want everything cancelled because that's who they are. But I don't actually see cancel culture as this thing that so many people promote it as. But maybe I'm out of the loop. What is the pair of yours experiences with cancel culture? Do you actually see a genuine problem with things being cancelled and the cancel culture?
There are different aspects to it. There's the common quote that is, there's no such thing as cancel culture, it's consequence culture. You've said a shitty thing, and now people don't want to buy your stuff anymore. You've promoted sexism or racism or homophobia, and now a university has cancelled your appointment to speak in front of their fucking students. And that's what a lot of people seem to think that cancel culture is, and that is bullshit. That is people making a choice, whether it's an individual person not buying a book or watching a film, or whether it's a private institution not giving you a platform to speak on their grounds. That's not you being cancelled. If you're fired from the fucking BBC for punching a director in the face, you haven't been cancelled. You've been a dick and you're getting the consequences for it.
Yeah.
But there are people who send J.K. Rowling death threats. I fucking despise J.K. Rowling to the core of my fucking being. I had
You've
no
not mentioned it
problem.
before.
I had no problem not consuming Harry Potter when I found out that she was a TERF, because I already hated Harry Potter. Couldn't have given two shits about it. Really fucking easy decision. I always made the joke when people asked me if I'd read any of the books. It's like, yeah, I read one. I think it was called Harry Potter and the Bastardization of English Literature. It really pisses people off. But yeah, my first ever tweet on my mistranslation page was, "Did you know the J.K. Rowling stands for ginormous cunt?" I can't stand her. Would I send her a death threat? No. Should she get death threats? Of course she fucking shouldn't. Do not send death threats to people on the internet. You're also a piece of shit. That cancel culture exists, and that is real and shouldn't be ignored or dismissed just because consequence culture is good.
Perhaps that's something that we should all try and take away from this. When people talk about cancel culture, just ask, is this actual cancel culture or is it just consequence?
Yeah, sorry, I apologise. I went on a little bit of a rant then.
Know
It
your
was
audience, know your
beautiful.
consumer. That's it.
Yeah.
It's coming back to that. Know your audience, know your consumer. If a company sells a certain product and that product isn't popular, then they're going to go out of business unless they change the products that they sell. That's essentially what it is, a consequence of not moving with the times or moving with what
Yeah.
your consumers want.
And it's certain things. I mean, I know, especially if you go back into Disney past, there's obviously issues there. But Disney as a company, whether it's because of the profit margin or not is irrelevant at this point, is trying to be progressive, is trying to be LGBTQ and all the other letters.
And the right say the left are snowflakes. Jesus Christ. One black mermaid and they go nuts.
There's
Jesus.
a rainbow pan on my Bud Light. Oh no!
Don't. Fucking
But
hell.
like, whatever the reason behind Disney being more liberal and progressive, even if it is just for the dollar bucks, that doesn't really matter. The fact is, their product is is putting forward these particular ideals. And if you're an actor that acts in something that is owned by Disney and you say something horribly against those ideals, getting fired, I wouldn't again call being cancelled. No, it's
I'm pretty sure that every job I've ever had, there has been a clause in the contract of bringing the company into disrepute as grounds for
yes,
removal.
yes,
Isn't that just a standard thing?
That's
yes,
just that, yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, if you're a pillar in a fucking primetime show or big movie and you come out being homophobic or anti-vax, then you're bringing the company into disrepute, and you've fuck
Unfortunately, you are.
cancel culture. You've broken your contract.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get fired when you do that.
Yeah, and it's because that with that sort of thing is very public facing. Like nobody knows who we necessarily work for. So if we have an opinion on Twitter, then there is no comeback to the company unless we mention the company. So in some respects, the average worker is more protected as long as they're not that don't have where they work and things like that in their profile are looking like they're talking on behalf of the company. But when you are an actor, your face is the face of the company. The company has many faces, but you are the frontline support. You are that person on the till in the shop, essentially. How the people treat you in the shop is what people think of the company. Because, well, if they employ people like that, then this company can't be very good. Same sort of thing for actors and actresses, and, you know, however you present yourself to the public does, unfortunately for them, go back to the company. And that is why people get cancelled, because they are going against the company's ethos or product. It's not cancelled.
I think the shop attendant analogy is a good one as well. It's like if you went into Boots to buy some Calpol for your sick kid, and the cashier goes, "Actually, I don't think you should be putting chemicals into your child," then fuck it, I'm going to be a Karen and I'm going to ask to talk to your fucking manager.
Give me the Calpol, and I'll put some chemicals in you.
Well, I don't think you should be drinking water then.
But
honestly,
yeah, I think that analogy works really well.
Confusion on people's face when you turn around with that, because they don't realise water is a...
Yeah.
Yeah, everything is fucking chemicals. Very rarely will anything be in purely element form. So what are you expecting? Next you're going to start talking about toxins, aren't you? Go on then, tell me what these toxins are. Yeah, I thought not. It's the bad things. They're getting you. They get in your system. And it's what happens. And if
You see that?
just to have this slice of lemon with a bit of warm water and a bit of vinegar, and it just gets the toxins out. Yeah, what toxins? How does it work? What does it do? Well,
Have you seen that? Have you seen that meme that's got all the chemical or the what is it? The chemical elements or the ingredients of something
makeup.
that's the chemical makeup of something.
Oh yeah, and then it's blood.
Monotonous, and it's like a banana or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, digressing into science now. So,
well, you know, we are supposed to be a philosophy and science show, and apparently we don't know anything about philosophy or science, but that's what we pretend we are. That's the product we sell.
I wonder how many people, like on the right or the left, think they're the new suffragettes or they're the new Martin Luther King Jr. because they're fighting a fight or a cause that they think is so right that they're going to be the next movement, the next major movement. It's kind of, I do think that happens quite a lot. They think that they're fighting this case that is going to be the next big thing. I mean, it kind of goes for both sides, really.
I do,
but yeah,
I do sometimes really dislike the overly.
That bloody word.
Yes, I dislike the word as well.
It's a great word. It means that I'm not an ignorant piece of shit.
But that's what it should mean. But it's also again being used as. I don't like any of the terms that get overused and misused. They just become pointless. And you don't know what people are talking about when they're actually using it. But what I meant there, Bo, that the sort of SJWs, this is going back to the people who are offended by everything. You know, I think that a lot should be fought for in social justice. I am in no way saying that it shouldn't happen. I definitely think it should. But it's the people that take it too far. People that are offended by everything. People that get into every single battle. It's the people that perhaps see a can of beans that looks kind of odd and they need to speak to the manager. I mean, that's a ridiculous example, but like that sort of person that just takes everything too far.
It's like seeing a rainbow on your can of Bud Light.
Yeah, and it happens on both sides.
Yeah.
It very much happens on both sides. But
Because I saw another video, and it's obviously been edited, but there was a guy dressed in Mexican clothing, proper hat and garb and everything,
that's
and he
all
was
it is
going.
to be a Mexican. You just have
That's
a proper
but
hat on.
that's
That's
it.
it.
No,
That's
no,
Mexican
no.
clothing.
Yeah, that's it. Sombrero. He probably had a fake moustache as well.
So like the
But
proper
no,
terrible stereotype.
yeah. And he was going
Yeah.
around, and he was talking to mainly white people. Well, in
Mhm.
fact, all white people, and they were saying, "Is this offensive?" And people were saying, "Yeah, you can't do that. That's oh, what do they call it? Where they steal your what is it? Oh, what's the word? It's a term. Something culture. I don't know.
It's, when you're appropriating another
But yeah,
culture, cultural
cultural
appropriation.
appropriation. There you go.
There
There
we
you go.
go. Yes.
And they say, yeah, it's cultural appropriation. You shouldn't be wearing that because you're not Mexican. And every white person was like, yeah, you can't wear that. He then went off to Mexicans and says, "What do you think to my clothes?" He says, "Yeah, you look good. You look good, man." And they were saying, "No, you don't find it offensive." No, no, it's fine. You look great. Obviously, he's edited it to show to show only the white people saying, "Yeah, that's definitely offensive," and the Mexicans that said, "Yeah, it's totally fine." But I just think that that's kind of one of those perspectives that's quite amusing, that people are getting offended for just dressing in traditional Mexican clothing if
Yeah,
you're not Mexican.
it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think some of it ties back into what is tied into the culture. Um, for example, I don't think that there is necessarily any oppression linked to that particular style of clothing. Um,
No,
Again,
but
it
things
could be
people
ignorant. I mean, I know
people
people
were
are, somewhat racist to Mexicans and things like that. That's not saying that, but I don't think there's necessarily anything tied into that. But could we say the same about if you were to perhaps wearing a traditional African garb, for example? Would you?
I think I reckon they'd like that though, wouldn't they? But that's obviously me, a white, saying
And
African
situation.
people wouldn't mind. What's that?
I think it also depends on the situation as well. If
Yeah,
you're
of course.
doing that as a way to honour somebody, like say you went to Africa, say like heads of state get flown off to Africa and they have this big tribal ceremony put on for them and they wear the garb, then that's a point of celebrating that culture,
Mhm.
immersing yourself in it,
Mm.
and that's a good thing. But if you make that into a Halloween costume, it's got a little bit of a different fucking feel then, right?
I have a thing with Halloween costumes and people dressing up as things that aren't scary. That's not a Halloween costume. It's just a fancy dress costume.
Or just put sexy in front of anything and then
But yeah,
what?
I get
Who
what you
thought
mean.
of a sexy cat? Who looked at a cat and thought, "Oh, yeah."
I don't know.
Uh,
Did you watch The Lion King when you were younger? I mean, Nala.
okay, we have found who I was asking about. But yeah, I think that is intent again, or even just being cognizant of having intent behind it. There is definitely a difference. There can be appropriation in a negative way, and there can be appropriation where you're celebrating something and paying respect to it.
There was calls that white people with dreadlocks was in a cultural appropriation, which I think is crazy. I think that's just ridiculous. But that's not. It's not like they're going, "Oh, I'm gonna have my hair like a Jamaican or whatever." Because I mean, white people were having dreadlocks in like the Viking days,
But
and it had
yeah,
come
Yeah,
from there for a start.
prob-
But like, it's not. I don't think even if you were just having dreadlocks because you like reggae music, it's not. I don't think that's an offensive thing. It's not a bad thing. Just you don't wash your hair.
yeah, and that's potentially a bad thing.
For a different reason.
Yes. Yeah, I
But
think the thing with the like the dreadlocks, I sort of struggled with seeing that the same. But then again, I'm just another white guy. What do I know? So
This is it. Like,
I.
yeah,
But then, if I was to
it's so
suddenly,
tough being white, isn't it? not,
okay,
not,
you don't get the things that we have to navigate here, man.
Jesus fucking duckweave, come on.
But I mean, I think it'd be a difference if we were to suddenly start wearing like the nappy. I think that's what that particular headdress was called. I mean, I think female head, but it's the cloth sort of thing. I think that sort of actually breaks into the culture a little bit more, and that could be seen as offensive. I don't the hair just in dreadlocks.
I think it also depends on what that means to them in their culture, whatever the that and the them are. So, say, I know one which I've seen brought up a lot is people referring to having a spirit animal, and that being referred to as cultural appropriation for Native American culture, because that is a very central thing in a lot of their spiritual beliefs, whereas a piece of clothing might or might not have that same kind of weight to the culture itself and to the spirituality and the history of that culture. Like with dreadlocks, I don't know. I'm not educated on this topic, but are dreadlocks a cultural fashion choice, or are they more? Do they have more of a cultural weight behind them? Is there a tie to the spirituality and the history of that culture? Because if there is, then I can understand them being a bit upset because some white dude who doesn't like washing went to Glastonbury once and decided that's his personality now. I can understand being a bit pissed.
Yes.
But if it's just, oh, we wear that hat because that's the hat that we wear, and somebody else decides to wear that hat, I don't understand why that would be an issue. But if it's tied to like a real sense of identity and culture, I can get it.
So, what if, let's just say we're in a situation where there have been both white and black culture with threads in the right for whatever reason necessarily matter, except we will say that one of those has done it because of a particular religious belief. Right? So, and the other culture has decided to do it, not with any intent of imitating that culture, but that culture is accusing them of cultural appropriation. Where does that sort of line get drawn? Because they're not actually doing it for that reason. It's not really cultural appropriation. Especially, I mean, if they've got Danish blood, for example, they come from or Nordic blood. They come from some form of Viking culture historically. So maybe they're honoring their ancestors, but they're being accused of appropriating Jamaican culture.
I don't think there's anything one can really do about false accusation. It's
No.
impossible to properly get in front of. You would have to, again, have a conversation with that person, explain what it was, and hope that that's enough.
It's a
I'm
big.
not going to say that if it's not, you should go and shave your head. But
Yeah. Again, I suppose that's a hard one to answer from our perspective. I don't think we've got enough of a diverse panel to really understand some of the nuances to other positions, and maybe it's something we take away and think about. See if we can get just to
I
have.
think in that specific example as well, I would definitely advise that if this, like, Nordic ancestry person has a fight with a black person over dreads, they definitely shouldn't then go and shave their head. Because a white person shaving their head after a fight with a black person probably comes across more negatively. I've seen American History X.
Brilliant. Brilliant film as well.
Really is.
Yeah.
Very good.
And it's kind of a hard watch in a lot of places, but I think it's a good learning device. And obviously it's not funny, it's not a comedy, so it doesn't really fit into the theme of tonight, but it does
The reason it's hard.
framing device. Fits into the framing device that we were talking about. Sometimes you can have a difficult joke that works and teaches whilst making. But yes, sorry, Andy.
Just saying the reason it's difficult to watch and it's a real gut wrenching is kind of evidence that the culture has moved on from where it was a few hundred years ago, where black people weren't as equal as white people. It's good that it's that hard hitting, you know.
Yeah. I actually saw something the other day as well. Someone made a comment that companies are becoming more LGBTQ plus friendly, and whether that and whether that's for profits or not, it doesn't matter, because in fact, even if the only reason they're doing it is purely for profit, it shows that the rest of the world is moving in the right direction, because
And from
Yeah.
can I just do a slight personal relation to this as well? Is that it, even if it's not an indication of the culture, it matters for representation. Because I took a long time to learn that I'm queer. I knew I wasn't the normal fucking straight boy at school, but I didn't know what I was. And if I wanted any queer representation at all, I had to wait 15 years, basically. But imagine that fucking 6, 7 preteen kid who's questioning that of who they are, what their identity is. They walk through a town in Pride Month, and there's pride flags and openly queer people just everywhere. That shit is fucking invaluable, regardless of whatever it means. If that helps one fucking queer kid learn who they are and that it's okay to be that, then fuck everybody who hates it. I don't care.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I think that's so. I do think it's an indication that things are moving into more directions. I know there's roadblocks along the way, and I know there's troubles that I am never going to experience in my position. I know I'm probably not doing enough to help others who need the help, but I hope I can in some way. If it was ever my kids that had that, or they had friends who were going through things or anything like that, I would have enough understanding to be someone who can support them in they needed. But as you say, there's also more representation out there. There is more understanding in today's culture than there was. So, especially with homosexuality, I think that has come on in leaps and bounds. Someone growing up gay now, it's still not going to be easy for them, because we're still not there yet. Because we're in a culture where we take the piss out of everyone anyway, and we go too
Easy
far
target.
on an
That's
easy
what it is.
target.
Especially when your kid's at school
Yes,
and
you don't really understand.
any little reason for
Yeah.
being different is going to be, oh, I'm going to take the piss out of that. That's what kids do.
But with the
And as
equal
unfortunate as it is,
representation, there is a good chance that they can wash it off their back. I remember it. Even certain things. I remember the first time I noticed something. Someone called me a wanker, and I was like, "Yeah," and they went, "What?" I was like, get old enough, you'll be a wanker too, mate. And it was sort of taking the insult and actually turning it round. And I feel that if there is more equal representation, if a queer child has that representation out there and can see some of the comedy and have sort of more interaction and awareness, even if they do get picked on, and it is going to be hard for them, they are going to be somewhat more resilient because they're like,
and have a community to go and get backup from.
exactly.
It's a shame that we didn't have Martin on, because I know this was a big discussion we had with him in the past about labelling identity and community. But
It's all right. Well,
like,
we can always do a part 2. But there's some content from this stream that I think it would be good to circle back to. One with a more diverse panel, but also focus on the topics themselves. And I am
something I did want to touch on in a little bit more depth before we move away completely is, so we've kind of covered whether old comedy should be cancelled or not because of the intent and everything that was behind it. But what about just because of words? So we've just all been very comfortably and freely using the word queer. 20 years ago, that was an outright
insult.
slight against gay people. And they're,
You're queer.
yeah, I mean, I grew up with that shit. And guess what? You were right.
In the word.
No, I'm not. It's like, oh shit.
My response to that one was, I'm not good looking enough.
We have other words, and I mean, I'll be comfortable using words like fag, as we've discussed before. Fag and queer, back in fucking 1997, were equal fucking words. They had the same meaning, they had the same level of venom and viciousness behind them. There was no hierarchy split between them. They meant the same thing.
Yeah.
But if a joke from a TV show in the 90s used the word queer, and I watched it now, wouldn't have an issue. If it said fag, it would make my skin crawl a little bit. And I mean, obviously, there are other examples that I'm not going to use for other groups, but like, do we chuck it out just because that word feels icky now, and where other things don't?
It's tough, isn't it? I suppose some of it comes down to the intent as well. I remember being back in my journey of trying to make myself more careful with saying, but I was friends with this gay couple and they were using all these offensive terms to each other, and it was part of their banter, and sometimes it was a lot lighter. It was just, oh, you fuck, sort of thing, and sometimes it was a lot darker, but it was just the way they were enjoying their time with each other. And it was, I think I was aware in that situation that this isn't something I could get away with. In fact, maybe I could, but not in any other situation other than this, and I probably shouldn't in this situation as well. But the language between them, they've taken the power back. It's like you're saying, the power has been taken back with the queer. But if you're looking back at old stuff, how was the word queer being used then? And again, it's the intent. Was the word queer being used in a negative way, or was actually that show a bit more progressive and it was just, yeah, he's queer, so what, sort of thing? Because again, there's that intent. Should the show be cancelled? That is another
I think on that point it would have been the former, because the word queer wasn't used until a lot later as we use it now, as we use it nowadays.
Reclaimed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the fucking initialism that most people use now. It's LGBTQ
Yeah.
plus or IA plus.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that is just part of the language now. But there are still people in queer Facebook groups and stuff that I frequent that outright refuse to accept that that word is anything other than a slur. So I won't use it around them. But this is what we were talking about
Know
earlier.
your audience.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, the difference between queer and fag, I think, might have been a bad example. But if a word was used as a throwaway and not an insult, and now we've learned that that word is bad, say, like the N word, I ain't using it. But I mean, I know there has been points in the past on streams where we have all argued that it's absolutely fine for us to say it because we're using it as an educational example within a conversation. My opinion has changed. I ain't using it. But if that was just a throwaway word in an old fucking sitcom between two white people, and now we fucking know how racially charged that is and what that can do we cancel that? Or do we go with the Disney approach of the little disclaimer at the beginning of the film? Like, we recognise that this film features certain aspects that are culturally bad nowadays, but we think it's important to maintain the and blah blah blah, whatever it is it says.
What was that?
Sorry?
Disney. Which Disney film is that?
Oh, loads of them.
It's on a couple
Is
of
it?
old ones.
So-
Yeah,
One of them's. I know one of them they haven't released. It's not on the Disney. Is it Song of the South or something
Yeah.
like
Oh,
Yeah.
But there's no that they do it. There's see my child has Disney. Sometimes we're looking for films. You can't even find like Moana on there. And it's like what? Then you
Why
switch to
not?
my account and it's there.
that's an age thing.
Might be, but there are definitely a lot of films that are rated U. I don't
Look,
that you can't even watch on their account, and you have to switch to mine. Can't remember. I think Jungle Book might be.
I just looked it up. Some of the examples are Aristocats, Dumbo, and Peter Pan and
Yeah.
Swiss Family Robinson.
What's in Peter Pan?
Stereotypical portrayal of native people.
Yeah. Which could
Yeah,
also,
they have a little disclaimer
God,
that
yes,
it
yes.
could be the same thing with
Oh my
Moana,
God.
though, couldn't it? You think about the island people.
I think with Moana, it is largely more a celebration of that culture than a negative
Yeah, because
stereotype.
that's the whole point of the story,
Yeah,
Yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
but there are still people who get offended by it.
Rather than people walking around going "How" and all that
yeah.
shit.
With a lot of these things now, when they're made, they have teams that work in conjunction with cultural councils and teams from those countries to make sure that they're doing it in a respectful and appropriate way.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. But I mean, there was a stream that I was doing with Dave actually, and there was a movie about Islam and Allah, or the journey of I've forgotten Muhammad, and the whole movie was done in where from that perspective with um one of the groups at the time who were very obviously the equivalent of sort of fundy Protestant like group, um, and they had connected with them on all the things just to make sure there was nothing culturally offensive in it. And this was back in the 70s, yet still there were riots from Muslims before it even came out, assuming that it was offensive to Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. There are people
It
who,
happens.
yes,
Look at Life of Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say that happened exactly the same in the
Yes.
70s.
Yeah. And he's not even depicting Jesus.
No,
I mean, they do. They depict
Yes.
Jesus very
Is on the
briefly,
mount,
well,
yeah.
he does for
so
Sermon on the Mount, and yeah, they
camera
have these
pans.
two prominent Christian, a bishop and something or other, I believe, complaining about how they were portraying Jesus. Like, well, no, what we were doing was portraying people who were misinterpreting what he was saying. We
Wake
depicted
up! I
him
can't.
saying what he said, or what it says in the book that he said. It's verbatim. That's
Yep.
all that he does in the film, and then we cut to people who mishear him and misrepresent, and it's like they've got one bit where there's a whole group of Brian's followers, and as Brian's run away, his shoe falls off, and they just pile on the shoe and hold out like praise the shoe of the prophet. He is the chosen one. And then they all start arguing as to what this means. It's like we should all take off one shoe and live like a prophet does. And another's like, no, this is obviously a sign that we should collect shoes. And they just get into this massive fucking fight over just this trivial fucking event.
Now that is
And
satire done very well.
yeah, this is what I was saying earlier. Python have always been a genuinely clever example of doing this and not punching down at people. They're just making clever observations and commentaries about the absurdities around this shit. And the same with their trans stuff. Like it was for Life of Brian again, where it's the whole discussion in the Colosseum of one of them wants to be Loretta now. And that whole, well, where's the fetus going to gestate in a cardboard box? And like, it's not bullying, it's not mean, it's not cruel, it's just a funny line of a absurd observation.
I think there are still going to be, I mean, they were back then, and I think there are still going to be now who perhaps miss that. They don't understand. And that's probably because, as we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of pain that they've gone through, and they are not necessarily equipped to understand that it's not, that it is just making some point.
I mean, it
And
is difficult to think of Monty Python as not punching down if you look at where the people came from, because they're all middle class Oxbridge white boys
Yeah.
making fun of people, so it could easily be construed as that, but I don't think it ever was. And having watched documentaries and interviews and read biographies and shit, it very much seems to at least largely be the case. And I mean, Graham Chapman was gay. He didn't know that for quite a long time, but I think they were always being absurdistly respectful.
well, I think there's been a lot of good points that have been made today. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. There's been some things that we can't answer because we don't necessarily have the right panel for it, but we've covered off certain things about like looking back past and were we wrong for laughing? It's sort of like, well, maybe it was wrong to laugh, but we didn't know any better, so we weren't intentionally wrong. So it wasn't necessarily a moral wrong, but we now understand better about the actually more responsibility comes down to the creators who are putting out the media and the companies behind them who are, mass producing the stuff. We've discussed offense and how, yes, there are some people who just are offended by everything, but we should probably try and take the time to find out what's actually offending them, or we just dismiss them as, oh, just another offense. But yes, there are going to be some people who are just offended because they look for it and everything. They shouldn't necessarily, once you've given them a chance, taken into account. Yet, if someone does explain a genuine harm that is, should try and understand those harms
Take ownership of the effect you've had on someone.
Yes, yeah, that too as well. So not only the harm that might be done in the context of a comedian doing it, but ourselves. If we've said something or anything like that, take ownership. So offense isn't necessarily enough to give someone the consequence of being able to show somewhere, have talk. In fact, offense can be a powerful tool as well, because sometimes there are offensive comedies or just things that are plain offensive that need to be done that way to have the impact that is required to be successful communicating the message. We've also discussed absurdist things. There are types of comedy that perhaps aren't punching down, they're drawing caricatures at times. So they weren't intentionally punching down. But we can also understand that sometimes they go too far and inadvertently punch down. So even though the intent wasn't there, perhaps there is still a harm being caused. Those ones perhaps be. There's plenty of things that we might look back on ourselves and we cringe at the fact that we used to find funny, and if we watch them again, we no, or there's a lot of situations like that. But at the same time, we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves for the fact that we used to find again. We didn't know. Have a lot more understanding. And the people out there who still don't get it because they don't have the understanding. And I bet most of them do have the capacity to learn. So the next question is, how do we get people who seem to be stuck in a bias, in a particular pattern of not even hate, but just ignorance, understand another perspective?
It all depends on whether somebody is ignorant or willfully ignorant.
Well,
yes, it does. But even those who are ignorant are sometimes a bias still gets in the way ahead of it. And we all have biases. Are prone to make it's hard to get over our own biases, let alone get around someone else. And it's not necessarily that they're willfully ignorant, it's the fact that they've got a bias getting in the way of the. I think it's a tricky situation. But I think the way cultures are moving in general, the way media is moving in general, the way there's more representation for minority groups everywhere, are good steps. I don't think we're there. Even groups that have been, 50 odd years in a lot better situation than they once were, still not there. So groups that are just finding their voice now still have a massive battle ahead of them.
I think the important thing that is always going to be the biggest step towards any of this is educating kids. Our generation are still very much of 90+% of people, I expect, will argue that there are only two genders. Because in school we were taught, no, it's XX and XY and that's it.
And even that's wrong.
Yeah, completely fucking wrong. But I know that in schools now, sometimes they address how that's a basic understanding and there is a lot more to it, and there are more than two genders. Now, the next generation might not take that forward because they're still going to be taking on a lot of the attitudes of our generation being their parents. But the generation after, where maybe it's not 10% who are open to it, it's 30%. And then the generation after, maybe it's not 30%, maybe it's 60%. And I think it all comes down to, like you say, it's the biases that get in the way. And you can sit down and you can have a heartfelt, honest conversation with somebody and lay your heart and your life out on the line to try and teach them some empathy. But if they can't get past those biases, then there's nothing you can do. But in a generation's time, there's going to be more people who are open to that. And the generation after, more again. And it just has to become normalized over time.
And I suppose with more representation, more people will be coming out or coming into their own a lot younger. So there is a chance that everybody will have a friend that they are aware is in one of these groups.
Yeah.
And so then there will be a lot more connection. Because as soon as you know someone who's going through some of that, you instantly have more empathy for the plight of anyone in that. Sort of the way we work. That's one of our biases. At the end of the day, we look after our family and includes our close friends. And therefore, if one of our family members is going through any of these troubles, we suddenly have still not necessarily the understanding. Don't get me wrong, some family members are complete dicks and just go, no, you're just making it all up. Forget those ones, right? Talking about the good family. Which I hope that everyone out there who's going through anything has. But I do think that's going to be another benefit. Going to be more people going through things, so they're not going to have to go through it.
I mean, a prime example of the fact that over generations and over time, things do improve and generations look back on previous ones and think that they weren't doing as good is the fact that you can get 3 arseholes sat on YouTube talking about it for 2 hours. That's exactly the context of this stream, is we're looking back on what was okay or was thought and how that's changed over time.
Yeah, and you know what? In 10, 20 years' time, someone might find a couple of clips from this and go, can you believe what these fuckers were saying?
Yeah, probably us.
Yeah. But by that time, we won't even know that it was us. Yeah. Now, I think it's been a good stream. Did either of you have any more points that you would like to cover off before we close up?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, then I'd like to say thank you very much to both of you for coming. It's been great having a conversation with you both. It feels like it's probably been about 6 months since we've had a face-to-face chat.
Ages.
Maybe even longer for you.
Yeah.
In fact, last February was the last time I saw you, Andy.
Bloody hell.
That
Was it last February?
I think
Jesus.
it was last February when we came to see in
Broke Ivy's finger.
Yes.
No, I saw you last April, Joe, because I had the memories come up on Facebook of seeing you on the beach.
Yes. Yeah. Wasn't the weather lovely then? It's still
It really
pretty
was.
cold now. There was a bit of sunshine. God, we're being English discussing the weather. Fuck.
Now it's going to rain for weeks.
Yes.
Because it was English.
Well, weather aside, it's been a lovely stream. And no, thank you both. And hopefully we can do it again soon. I'm going to try and get back into doing some more regular streams. I'm probably only going to do one a week for a while. And with the way the kids are being, I'm going to keep late. They're going to be probably 9:30 Thursdays. So if either of you are up for future streams or have any ideas of things that you'd like to discuss, that's when they're going to be. It's an open invitation. If you're going to be there, wicked. I hope you do. And well, that's it. I haven't got anything booked in for next week yet. I've videos that I've done recently, and I've got. But you know, you're probably better off going to Dave's channel if you want some new content. you don't have much new content at the moment, but I'm trying to sort it. I am. Anyway, thank
It
you.
takes a while for the AI to come up with these scripts.
Yeah. We should actually at some point do a video completely generated by AI. You know, like that article that you did about. I love the responses
Someone
from it.
got so angry about that. It was
Yeah.
brilliant.
So, if you didn't know, Kristen is one of the authors at Answers in Reason as well,
Used to
and
be.
yes, I suppose that's a better way to put it. The only article you've done in what 2-3 years
Yep.
it is one that was actually fully generated by AI about the
Yeah, it was
issues with
entitled something along the lines of the importance of keeping artificial intelligence out of art.
yes.
Yeah, the entire thing was just AI. I even used AI to do the searches to find the images to put into it.
A short treatise on the importance of championing human artistic expression, keeping AI out of the creation of art.
There we go.
I assume that that title was also done by AI.
Yeah, I did nothing. Like, I wrote like 3 prompts, and that was it.
And you wrote at the end just to
Oh,
let you know
yes.
that this was completely generated by AI. But
Can you
people were
remember that person who got so angry? Like,
yeah.
you can't say that. This is all nonsense. That's not what art is. Like, did you finish the article? I was like, no, I didn't have to.
You
Yeah,
did because you've just missed the point.
I totally missed that one. I need to go read that now.
I mean, they made a good point.
Yeah, no, there were some really good points in there. But yeah, I mean, it's still on the front page of answersinreason.com at the moment. It is third row down on the right hand side at the moment, so it's still there. Uh, and yeah, it's very interesting the reactions you get from, and they're not even taking the. And this is something you do find with a lot of online conversation. People are definitely reactive, like way before they've even taken the time to understand what is being said. And that is part of the problem with a lot of the online conversation. It's, especially if you're on like Twitter or a Facebook debate group, just can't get through to someone because they are so determined that they're following a script in their head. They can't break away from it. And if you're not saying things they expect someone for X group or othered to Y group, um, and I mean, I saw one earlier. There were people correcting bad history. They were all labeled as fundamentalist Christians. But no, you've just got history wrong about this particular thing. That doesn't like. But yeah, and as
Mental
things,
historians.
one of them was someone who was a historian. Yes. So, but anyway, that's for something for another matter. Perhaps that's one that should go into the new series of Absolute Teaspoon. I don't know if either of you have checked out the recent article or some of the shorts or slightly longer videos, but I've been addressing conversations I've had online with people who demonstrate those sorts of behaviors. I've tried in the past doing it placidly and just addressing arguments in general, and people just say, straw man, no one says that. Okay, here you go. Here's examples of someone saying this thing. Now let's have the same discussion I've been trying to have with you for ages. Um, so that's my sort of most recent project, but it's still very hard to find. So
It'll all be in vain.
yes, of course it will, but it
I
keeps me out
I
of
gave up.
mischief.
I gave up a bit of serious conversation long ago, I think.
Yeah,
Now.
probably sensible. I think that's why I'm just taking screenshots and using it in videos rather than actually
Yeah,
trying to
it's a good
continue
idea.
with the conversations myself.
There was this one particular. I can't remember what it was about. There's this one particular one where I'd give a jokey response, and it was an obvious joke as well. It wasn't like subtle, and they responded saying, "Oh, well, tell me what you think." And I just gave them nothing. I argued absolutely no point. I said nothing apart from just trivial bullshit. And they were so frustrated that I wasn't engaging with them, but still replying. And then it was, wow. I have time for that, but I can't be bothered with the series because I'm never going to change anyone's mind.
I'm not
They've got their
that
mind
sort of
up, and
person.
they're just trying to spar with someone, and I'm not having it.
That's it.
No,
A lot of it is fight mentality, isn't it? I think there are
yeah,
a
of
few
course.
genuine people who want the conversation online. You might not change their mind, but you might have a.
But
But,
those sorts of people won't reply to a joke comment.
or they will,
The-
and
the-
they'll laugh, and then they might say,
oh,
"But
oh yeah,
seriously,
okay,
what's
fair
your
enough.
actual take on it?" Because that's pretty funny. But what do you mean?
Or you'll get fuckwits like me who see it and autistic brain takes it completely seriously and doesn't realise it's a joke.
I think you'd understand. Yeah. We've got a similar
Surely I do.
humour. I think you'd definitely get it.
Yeah,
I'm sure I screenshot it somewhere. I need to find it. But then he deleted and blocked me. So there we go.
That's a shame.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh no.
I've kind of come full circle with this whole debate group. I started off just fucking around. Then I started going, okay, then I can chat with you seriously. And then I've gone like, nah, fuck this. I'm going back to old me.
When I started with the debate groups, I used to have like serious like conversations and doing research for days with people. And my attention span now rarely lasts to the end of the comment that I'm actually typing. And it's like, no, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. I must admit, I've actually got to that point a lot of the time myself. There are still times when, often if I'm in incredibly nothing else, I might get involved in it. But sometimes I've spent time writing out a long response, and then I get to a point where I go, actually, no, this conversation isn't going to go any different any other conversation that I've had on this topic. I really don't have the time or will get into this one.
I might get myself back into it and go back to my old acrostic style. They-
I saw that T-shirt you made.
It's so much fun. You write out what looks like a genuine response, and just as an acrostic, it just says "you are a cunt" down the side.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I think the best one I ever managed was "supercilious fuckwit" down one side.
Amazing.
I've
That's got
just
to
found a
take.
screenshot. I've just found a screenshot of one of them. This was me saying,
Share it on
I
the
think
thing.
this was a response. Just said, "Do you believe in facts?" And they said, "This is obviously about I don't believe. I accept facts." And he said, "I accept that certain data can be independently verified, which we call facts." I said, "There's a word for accepting facts. Do you know what it is?" Because obviously he doesn't he doesn't believe anything.
Yeah. Some of those conversations, I mean, they can be painful. At times, it can be entertaining. Like, it can be a good boredom killer, but I think you can lower your expectations. Generally, most people, you're not going to get anything out of it. Sometimes you do, though. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you learn something yourself as well from some of the conversations. And that's what I like. I like it when I have a good conversation with. But those good conversations are few and far. They don't have the time, all that effort. I'd much rather think about something, do some research, write an article, or maybe have a conversation like we're having right now about a topic that interests. Even if we've got some people on the panel who have really strong opposing views, but are capable of a discussion. That's what it's about. I like the discussion. I like learning about it. I have a very single sort of point of view in life. My experience is very different to even any other white guy, let alone someone who has grown up in a completely different country, completely different race, different religions, different trials and tribulations. Some of that stuff can be really interesting. And there isn't enough understanding there either, in particular. It's.
Do you remember Vyala?
Yes, vaguely. That was.
He springs to mind. The old Does God Exist?
Does God Exist? That was it. I was
And
gonna. Yeah.
he was a very fundamentalist Nigerian Christian when he joined the group. In probably 10 years of adminning that group, he is one of 3 people who I ever changed their mind.
Yeah.
Wonderful fucking guys. And go check out his Twitter and listen to him sing. Jesus Christ. If I had ovaries, they'd ache.
Yeah. But that's just it. Like, I think that's the same sort of thing. There's only been a few conversations where I can think. There's probably only been 2 people I think I've changed the mind of. Oh God. There's a few people that I've helped realize some of the arguments they were making for certain positions in morality were bad arguments. Even if I haven't changed their position on morality, I think there's only one person I ever changed the position. But somehow, like, helping people realize that, you know, even if you do think morality is subjective, for example, this is a particularly bad argument for morality. There are other arguments. It's a sort of same sort of thing of the a good justification for atheism isn't lack of evidence. Lack of evidence. There's no evidence. A lot better justifications. In general, most people don't look past that. They're not actually interested.
They don't need to. They've got a soundbite.
Yes, exactly. But occasionally you'll find someone goes, "Oh, well, actually, yeah, go on then." And they could be on any side of the sort of thing, but they might be interested in learning more about it. Those people that I like to connect.
Look, if it won't fit on a bumper sticker, you can fuck off.
Yes, and that is basically social media in a nutshell. Anyway,
Thanks you for that fucking joke. Have you know that I'm allergic to nuts and I'm deeply offended by that?
We should have brought up, of course, but maybe. Saying that, my daughter actually is allergic to nuts. Still find that fun. So yeah, he obviously did it right. Have you seen that, the Louis C.K.?
Yeah. But maybe that one.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
If we all do this for a year,
maybe the problem will go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would that be count as something? Just making a
I think it's making joke. It's not at the expense of them. Is it? I don't think it's at the expense of it.
I'd say it's just
the
dark
situation.
Humor.
It is a dark humor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because then he goes on to say slavery is the worst thing in the world.
But maybe.
But maybe. And it's the two conflicting ideas.
Yeah.
He said that I've got what I think, and then I've got this little voice in my head saying the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, of course we should protect people. Of course we should, make sure that there are no nuts in schools. Of course, I've got a nephew. He's allergic to nuts. I don't want him to go through that pain. But maybe. If a nut's gonna kill you, you shouldn't be alive. Yeah. On that note. Thank you everybody for watching tonight, and thank you both for joining me. That's been like a half hour of signing off. That's proper fashion. Have yourselves a good one, and hang on 1 second, we've got a comment just missed. Sorry, Kimmo. Hello,
Another half
Kimmo.
hour coming off.
I've said it before, and I'll say it now. All the best philosophy is conveyed via T-shirts, bumper stickers, and fortune cookies. The best fortune cookie I ever got was one that said, "Next fortune will be better than this one."
I always, I always read when I get fortune cookies and they, you open them up and you read them out. I say, "Help! I'm trapped inside a fortune cookie factory, and they're gonna kill me."
I really want to get a massive fucking bag of fortune cookies and take them to D&D, and every time you're supposed to roll a dice, you just break open a fortune cookie and try to interpret that as the result.
That'd be amazing.
I try to attack the orc. Good luck next time. Fuck.
Look within or without. Whatever happens. What?
I think I hit him, but I think I hurt myself when I did it, maybe?
Forget all you know, or at least what you think you know.
Oh, great. My intelligence score has just gone down to 3. Brilliant.
Down.
Confucius
It is out of
say,
20.
man who stand on toilet, high on pot.
Man with hole in pocket, feel cocky all day.
Right, that's it. I'm shutting it down. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank
Terrible.
you for everybody who's watching. And I do apologize for all the technical faults right at the beginning. Have yourselves a good one.
And the content.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not going to apologize for the
Within,
content.
throughout.
Look, you've seen the show. We've discussed this. Like, you've seen the show before. If you're back again, you know what to expect. No apologies. No fucks given. Good night, all.
Bye.
Oh.
We appear to be off.